I'm Chris Barton, the founder of Shazam, and I invite you to watch the interview with me on Temas de Vanguardia by Interest. I believe that to do really high quality work, the only way you're going to get to a high quality output is to have that sense of purpose, because otherwise you're just going through the motions and you're really just kind of doing a job, and people can sense when you're just doing a job. So much like when you interact with a wonderful customer service person on an airline, you can tell when they're doing it because they care about it versus because they're just doing their job. And the same applies for anything that anyone does, including leaders of organizations, entrepreneurs, and so on. The most important value for me has always been integrity. That's been number one. I feel like it's the great starting point. Even when I selected which co-founders I'd start Shazam with, that was the number one thing, is people that I felt were very high integrity. And the reason it's so important is because whether it's your family members, your friends, your work colleagues, or partners, if you can't rely on the integrity, then you can't really rely on anything. So it's the starting point, and it needs to be a shared value both for myself and all those various people in my life, and it needs to be of high importance. Customer delight is in of itself extremely important in order to deliver products, services, anything that reaches a consumer in a way that they're going to want to embrace it. So where you don't have to have an ongoing effort to try to get them to use or embrace something, but they want to because they love it. So that's the end goal. It turns out, in my belief, that one of the primary ways to delight customers is to keep things simple, and really simple, because people they get confused and they don't want to go through the mentally taxing process of having to deal with a complicated system in order to achieve something. So simplicity is really important. In other words, remove the friction, make things easy. Now, it turns out that to make something simple and remove the friction, sometimes that requires complexity, because you sometimes have to solve a very complicated problem in order to deliver a very simple solution. I would say that it makes it harder and longer. Focusing on customer delight makes the journey both harder and longer, and more difficult, and more challenging, and sometimes seemingly insurmountable. So basically, the more that you want to achieve an ideal outcome of customer delight, the more you're going to have to overcome in order to get there. And overcoming that stuff is hard, but also takes time. So yeah, without doubt, in my experience, every time I've aimed for a very high bar of customer delight, it's been both difficult and more time-consuming to get there. So that's been my experience. In the case of Shazam, we had to overcome a lot of very, very difficult hurdles, do things that some people said were impossible, and come up with very innovative ways to solve complex problems that looked insurmountable until we just kept focusing on how we were going to overcome them. The same applies in my current startup, Guard, drowning detection. Everything is really difficult, all in the interest of accomplishing customer delight, and in many cases, simplicity and removing friction. I think that the reality is that on the road to success, it is inevitable that, especially on a difficult road to success, you're going to encounter failure along the way. The word failure actually has bad connotations because it makes it sound like such a dead end, like there's success and failure. But it's better to think of failure as just part of the journey towards success. Now, you will fail at certain things along the way, and then you'll simply have to try again or try a different way. But failure is bound to happen unless you're the world's luckiest and most talented person. Yeah, I would say that I personally have always thought of failure as just simply a disappointment, sort of an annoyance, something that I would just have to get past. In fact, in many cases, it's almost an incentive, an encouragement to just try harder or try a different way. So it can strangely be something that is encouraging rather than discouraging. That's how I've experienced failure. There's no doubt that I've experienced many failures in almost everything I've done. But for me, rather than kind of bringing me down and me taking it as a negative experience, I've always taken it as a challenge and something that is even more reason to try hard. An organization or person can be a disruptor ultimately by identifying a big opportunity that's also an incredibly difficult challenge that can be realized by doing something very differently than anyone was ever expecting. And that's really the definition of a disruption. No one is expecting it, no one anticipated it, and so when you are able to achieve this challenge, overcome this challenge, and achieve this new vision, it's a surprise to everyone and then changes their world, changes the world. I believe the keys to creating a culture of innovation are to really encourage a certain mindset and mentality in the culture, so among all the participants in the culture, all the employees in an organization. And that mindset is all about a can-do attitude, about thinking how can things be done, how overcoming hurdles and challenges, never really just sort of taking the shortcut or the easy way, but trying to think questioning assumptions and trying to really solve problems in creative ways. And I think just encouraging that way of thinking, which is not necessarily the default way of thinking. In fact, it isn't the default way of thinking. So one has to really encourage people to take a risk, put themselves out there, and think and act like that. Creative persistence is a concept that I coined actually to really describe the experience that I had with Shazam, but also an experience that I believe is critical to any organization that wants to achieve a stretch goal, particularly in innovation. And that's it's basically it's commonly said that entrepreneurs should be persistent, but I believe in more than that, and I experienced it in Shazam, plus saw it in Google as well, which is that it's not just persistence, but that it's about being creative and innovative and thinking up new solutions, different approaches as you try to persist to solve problems. So it's not just trying the same thing over and over. That would be like pounding your head against a brick wall until you finally break it down. But thinking outside the box and thinking, oh, what happens? Maybe I can climb over the brick wall, or maybe I can go around it, or maybe I can use a tool that will make it disintegrate. Thinking really creatively to get past the obstacle. Yeah, I think the way organizations can do that, can create an environment of creativity and trust, is there's sort of a long list of things that can be done, but it includes incentives for people, it includes rewards, it includes the way that the leaders communicate and demonstrate the types of behaviors they would like to see, and it includes sort of an environment where when people feel comfortable taking risks and failing as part of this greater view of taking risks and achieving outsized outcomes. To create an innovation dream team, I think what you really need is to identify all the core talents that you need in the team, and then make sure that the different team members are complementing each other. So people don't necessarily have similar approaches or similar skill sets or similar strengths, but actually very complementary ones, and bring different things to the table so that the aggregate effect of the team compounds upon itself, and people can work with each other, bounce things off of each other, but I draw out the strengths from each member of the team. So it's setting up these teams that bring different talents to the table so that you can ultimately solve a big problem. Yeah, I think diversity is extremely important, and I do think organizations need to intentionally create diverse teams. Ultimately, the reason is that a lack of diversity leads to a very narrow viewpoint of the world, and a narrow viewpoint of the world will produce a result that is narrow in scope. The world is a very diverse place. We're made up of many people, and so what we want is we want solutions that serve all those different people, and so the way to create those is to involve a set of diverse people at the outset. I think my dream team would actually probably include different personality types. They would not necessarily be all one type or one category. You might have one person who's highly productivity driven and organized, and another person who's the opposite of that, a bit disorganized but very creative, and one person who's a bit more abrasive, possibly even, and another person who's much more fun-loving. But the more important thing is that there are people that can respect each other, work together, and collaborate, and then that really would address the diversity of mindsets in the dream team. I think, the diversity of personality types in the dream team. With regards to mindsets, I think I would come back to these basic qualities of really being can-do attitudes. How do you solve problems? How do you overcome things? I think that slowing the team down would be the greatest risk. So the mindsets that would be of less value would be ones that are really kind of people that don't want to try hard, they want to give up, they want to cut corners. That would be a drag on the team. You really want a team full of go-getters that are positive, optimistic, and creative and curious, and want to find better solutions by working together. The challenge that entrepreneurs are facing now is we're in an economic environment that's quite challenging, with it, ultimately stemming from high inflationary rates that's following through to ultimately a dampened economy and dampened market, which really ultimately leads to a much more challenging environment for entrepreneurs to get capital. And since seeking capital is a fundamental aspect of being an entrepreneur that is building a capital-driven business, I'd say the current environment from that perspective is challenging. However, there's also opportunities in the current environment, and one of them being the fact that there's lots of new change that's in place today. lots of opportunity with this new change and fundamental shifts in the world that we're living in that enable whole new opportunities to be created. And so that creates tons of opportunity for entrepreneurs. I would say as an entrepreneur, the toughest lesson I learned is underappreciating the importance of really having a plan in place to preserve capital. I mean, ultimately, I like to compare how revenue is like oxygen, but essentially an entrepreneur needs to find a way to survive a limited amount of oxygen, and that oxygen is a combination of your funding and your revenue. It's critical to really optimize that, and I think it's very easy as a less experienced business leader or entrepreneur to underappreciate that and simply go through the steps of deploying capital and burning through your funds and then hitting a dead end and then not being able to change directions because of a limited amount of capital. I'm not really excited about the metaverse. I think the day that I feel really comfortable, truly comfortable in a self-driving car, that can be quite fascinating. I think that machine learning, artificial intelligence that's provided to really help in a meaningful way for personal things in life, your healthcare decisions, or you're optimizing your health, the most fundamental aspects of personal happiness. I think to the extent that there's AI and machine learning that can really support better outcomes in those things, I think that could improve the quality of life. Those would be the main two. And an entrepreneur, I think I really admire when they clearly are persistent, very persistent, but also open-minded and curious. I think that one of the dangers of an entrepreneur is the tunnel vision, and so keeping an open mind and the intellectual curiosity is often what leads to all the little small pivots along the way that ultimately lead to the best outcome. Gosh, I think I believe that we're investing heavily in humanity towards a world of abundance and less, addressing the limitations of scarcity. And so I would say all the efforts that we are undertaking to help people lead healthier, happier, more productive lives around the world, regardless of what the limitations they have from their lives are, is exciting, and so that would be the thing I'm most excited about. I'll say China Girl by David Bowie. And by the way, there's a little bit of a joke in that song. You want to know the joke? The joke is that I could never think, when it came to thinking of an example of a song when we were raising venture capital, I would always get sort of stuck and think, oh no, I can't think of one right in front of the venture capitalists. So I always would default to that one, and my friends and co-founders would always make fun of me, that I would always say China Girl by David Bowie. Because I suddenly couldn't think of a song in front of the venture capitalists. Let's go with The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I would say my motto is, be good to others. Electronic communications is a disruptor. I mean, prior to email, everything was done by talking to people either in person, on the phone, or in voicemail. So all the forms of electronic communications are a disruptor. A psychologist once said to me, "You can't change others, you can only change yourself." Hey, check out Dude, Where's My Car? It's a really good movie. Coming for a speaking engagement in the Dominican Republic.